Okay, let's start. I really appreciate having everybody's attention, and I want to thank Seven Peaks for letting us do another edition of Seven Peaks Speaks, the cloud meetup. And today's meant to be the battle of the cloud. You can see, but I'm not sure if it's going to be much of a battle, but more just like a learning experience. I want to introduce the panel here. Everybody can tell that I like to walk around when I talk, so I'm just going to keep doing this. Maybe we'll do a little bit of a self-introduction. So, Nasal Lihar, the head of solutions architect at Alibaba Cloud. Give me a second. Sarut Tipsena, the cloud solution director of Microsoft in Thailand. And everybody knows Nicholas, who is a cloud solutions architect at Seven Peaks Software. It's on the shirt. Everybody can see it. So maybe just really quickly, just a little bit of everybody's background. Can we start with you?
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Sun. You can call me Nasa or Sun. I work with Alibaba Cloud Thailand. So as you know, Alibaba Cloud is a subset of Alibaba Group. We have Ant Financial, Alipay, Taobao, Tmall, Alibaba.com, a lot of ecosystem company. We are embedded in the life of Asian people, like Chinese people or Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and Thailand. When you purchase things from the Alibaba.com or Tmall, Taobao, B2B, B2C, we have a China logistics in order to do like a last mile delivery or routing optimization. This is the cool thing from Alibaba Cloud. So, and when you purchase and deliveries, you have to pay it, right? We have Alipay or Ant Financial that you can easily integrate with the technology things. So with underlying infrastructure, we are Alibaba Cloud, we are data center provider, number one in the Chinese market and number one in Asia Pacific and number 3 of the world. Yeah,
Okay,
that's all.
Okay, thank you. And our second guest, just a quick introduction if you would be great.
Okay, Sarut Tipsena from Microsoft. A bit of myself. I think I'm old enough. I'm much older than some of the people in this room. I'm old enough to grow up with the mainframe generation. I'm the mainframe generation. I grew up with the first generation of internet in Thailand. Yeah, used to be a system engineer that installed, all the modem stuff that you bring to get access to the internet. That's how I am. Spent a few times in Microsoft, leading cloud business in Microsoft Thailand. Thank you.
I'm Nicola, working here at Seven Peaks. Cloud architect, started as a programmer and then jumped to lead and so on and so on. Working recently on discovery projects that we do at Seven Peaks, like helping you to build your system, what do you need, how you want, and design UX and architecture. And working more on AWS, a little bit on Azure and GCP.
No.
It's still a so it's already starting off really well, actually. I like the way this is going.
And then I'm waiting to look like what can Alibaba propose.
To see. I like it. So let's just jump right into this. I mean, the thing that I really want to know, I think everybody understands what cloud is. Everybody understands how important it is to our lives. And we've experienced it, so I'm part of the mainframe generation as well. When I started at Morgan Stanley in 1987, we had mainframe mail. And we used it for everything that we did, not just the mail, but the mainframe. That was the original cloud, right? But it was internal cloud, not external cloud. It was internally managed. What I really want to talk about is not what we have now, what's coming. And maybe we can start with you. What's coming? Yeah, maybe we can start with Sarut. So what's coming? What are some of the new things that are coming in the cloud that maybe we haven't seen in the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay, I think let's start with what is here now first. Yeah,
Fair enough.
Yeah. The new stuff that we are seeing at Microsoft more and more is the confidential computing.
Okay. How would you define confidential computing?
Basically, it's the ability to do compute without access to that data set. And that's very useful in telecommunication, in financial services, and in healthcare. Because those are the industry where they need to be able to compute with certain framework of the regulation is required.
Which means what? Which means that I can actually access the data without knowing what the data is and process that data and get some kind of response back, but I don't have access to the data itself.
Correct.
Is that a blockchain or crypto related process, or is
No,
that separate to that?
it's goes down to the hardware level where we have like a special set of the hardware
Okay.
where we can do all the compute in the VMs without accessing to those data sets.
Interesting. Okay.
So that would be the first one. The other two is another one that I'm seeing a lot, at least in the customer in Thailand, that talks a lot on this is sustainability. Yeah, I know it sounds cliche to all of you, right? But I'm very believe that all the big tech company, they're gonna need to touch a lot on sustainability because we all in tech industry, and if we believe that running things in the cloud can give something good for the whole world, that's gonna be about renewable energy. How can we compute certain things with the sustainable way in a sustainable way?
I understand. So can we give Sun a chance to also?
I support Kun Sarut or Kun Rus. We have in Alibaba we have a dedicated business unit called Damo Academy. It consists of the researchers around 300 people around the world, like from US, from West Coast, or from Dubai. We research about 5 different areas: like robotics, machine learning, AI. And the last one is very highlights quantum computing. It's very extreme, powerful, the machine learning, and we will revolution the cloud world in next 5 years for sure. This is the first thing. Yeah. And later, in the second thing is we talking about this term of the word, where if you can see the metaverse, Web3, decentralized finance. So right now, BOT, the top Thanakanแห่งประเทศไทย BOT, they have initiative to accelerate fintech. Like they open for the new competitor, like to enable the virtual branch, virtual banking law and regulation, license it, and open for the infrastructure. Everything is like to drive the cloud business in Thailand. Yeah.
So this is actually a really interesting topic. I want to go to you, Nicola, just to get your perspective on this. I want to talk. I don't want to get to quantum yet, but no, because quantum's coming, but it's not coming soon.
Yeah.
It's not coming soon. There's a lot of development that needs to happen. It is going to come. You're shaking your head, but it will come. But I want to talk more about existing in a virtual environment. Right? We can call it the metaverse. We can call it whatever we want. But if you think about just the sheer amount of data and the sheer amount of information and throughput that's going to be necessary to be able to create that immersive experience that people expect from the metaverse, it's going to be almost impossible in my mind to have internal data centers that do this. So from your perspective, from a development side, right, and from an architectural side, how do you see this looking, again, 3 years out? I'm a big believer in this idea that we're going to have virtual experiences. You know that because we've got a studio back there that's meant to do it. But how do you see this developing from your side? And what does it mean for compute and for storage and for accessibility, particularly on, what did you call it? Private compute.
Yeah, after I'm coming a bit back and what we have now, actually, what we have and what everybody is trying to build right now is API and how to bring the data in the system. That's what everybody is doing now. Now, what we want is to use this data basically to do everything, like you said, machine learning, try to make the data intelligent and use it. And that's what will come next. And then what we also have at the same time is all those IoT devices where we can push the data in our data centers, analyze it, and use it. And after we can expand to quantum computing. That's what I see. And more automation and everything around.
Got it. So up until now, do we have any questions from the people that are sitting in the audience? I've got plenty of questions on my own, but I'm curious if anybody out there wants to ask something specifically related to what we've already discussed. Go for it. You want to just say it loudly? You can actually do this. Use this.
Thank you.
And can you say to whom you're addressing this question, if there's a specific person?
There's not really a specific person I'm addressing. By the way, I'm Guy from Red Hat, Thailand. My question is because I heard the keyword from Pisarut. He said something about sustainability from the cloud. There's a lot of cloud growth in the market right now. It just keep on growing, right? And that comes with a lot of physical burden that many cloud providers have to deal with. the data centers running out of spaces and everything. So it kind of go the other way, right? Like sustainability, but the increase in usage. So how do you guys deal with that?
In Alibaba Cloud Data Center in Hangzhou, Chinese sovereignty, we have only one data center we have up to 9 or 10 availability zone. So we use for example, we use the liquid cooling system that can allow the reduce of the air conditioning power and save economy and energy. Yeah.
Can I just jump in for a second? Please go ahead. Grab the mic for a second. But I have a view on this, and I'm curious what everybody else's view as well. I think sustainability is not a straight line. Does that make sense? It's not just going to be an up and to the right thing or a down to the right thing. We're not just going to get sustainable. I think it's going to go in stages, right? And I think it's a really good question, but I think part of what's going to happen is we're going to learn as we develop the cloud or any other technology, to be fair. Bitcoin is another great example in this, right? Of just using too much energy, too much water resources, too much land. But over time, we'll figure out. So I think it's going to go like this, right? And then over time, the sustainability factor will get stronger and stronger. It's a really good question. But at the beginning of the development of any new technology, or frankly anything, we don't know, right? But we have to push the big companies that are building this to say we don't only want the services that are associated with this, we want the sustainability go hand in hand with it. Go ahead.
Okay, to address your question first, I think I'm a big believer in the economy of scale, and I like to put a metaphor. We all using electricity today, right? How many people in this room have an electrical generator at home?
Yes, zero.
Zero, correct? Yeah. Correct? So, by the way, the big disclaimer is this is my belief, yeah? It's just a belief.
Yeah, it's okay.
I believe that when it comes to compute power, the world is going to be much better off because if we have a big world computer, as compared to every home has their own computing power, just like the way that we consume the electricity. Because when you have the economy of scale, you have the scale to manage the efficiency. 1% improvement in the cloud data center is much bigger than 10% improvement efficiency in every home, every own private data center. So again, I'm saying this because I'm the cloud director, right? That's very clear. But yeah, it's my personal belief that the more people using cloud, it's going to give the efficiency to the computing world. And if we all, as I'm wearing my consumer hats,
Right.
if all the consumer keep pushing the cloud provider to ensure that they are green, that's going to help the world a lot. That's my belief.
Can I jump in? So this is a really good point. I do, and not to sell this at all, but I do an entire podcast that I call the Social Innovation Podcast. And we talk about this idea of sustainability a lot. And one of the things that the purveyor of services that they expect to be sustainable tell me all the time is that it's heavily dependent on consumer choice, right? And just like you said, we can complain about the fact that cloud providers or anybody else are not being sustainable. But you said it. If consumers say we will not accept these products unless they're given to us in a sustainable way, by definition, we'll decide en masse, I think, by spending where we expect to spend, and the companies will have to react.
After I will do more AWS advertisement.
Oh,
So,
sorry.
yes, on AWS they created this new pillar, which is sustainability. So now on AWS side, what you can do is like measure and get the metric of how you impact the environment and how you can improve it. And every day, they release like new tech, like new processors, new ARM processors, like, and say, oh, you can save this amount of energy, and then I give you this amount of power. So when you use a cloud, actually, they give you for free all those like new features outside of the box. So I guess you as well. And then what we have on the cloud is also more managed services. So basically, when you go in this kind of way, you can use the cloud to build and by their help, basically.
Does anybody in the audience have any more questions about this topic? You do. You want to just scream it out, or you want me to bring the mic? Oh, it's gonna fine.
You can hear us, right?
Yep.
Just this morning, there was a raid in Germany at Deutsche Bank because it was greenwashing what its clients were saying. I have a feeling some of the clients you might work for.
Are you telling me that Deutsche Bank was involved in a controversy?
It was just raided this
Shocking.
morning. Well, the thing is, every single one of the companies, whether it's Microsoft, Apple, whether it's Alibaba, have all been caught in controversies about greenwashing. So I understand what you're coming from. Well, I've worked on infrastructure projects, and believe it or not, Amazon was flying people almost individually on planes to build data centers during COVID. Microsoft was doing the same. I'm presuming Alibaba was doing the same. So when you stood there and said, this is what we're doing about sustainability, and the customer will dictate, well, the customer really doesn't have the technical logic to dictate. That's down to governments. That's why in Europe, you act different, whilst in Asia, it's all right. We can get away with building dodgy things, exploiting.
So let me jump in just for a second.
So what are you doing here?
Let me just jump in for a second. If you think about the beginning, because I think we're at an inflection point, and I'll tell you why. If you go back and you look historically at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, it's the same thing, no different. And it took almost a generation to fix all of the things that were bad about the Industrial Revolution. I'm using bad as kind of a catch-all term. And I think we can say the same thing, that we are in extremely early days. We joked at the beginning that we're the mainframe generation. I definitely am. I don't know about you. Look at my hair. But you're not supposed to laugh that hard. But we joked about this. We're at the early days of this, right? And people fly to Davos and talk about sustainability. People are flying all over the world all the time. I don't think we can stop that. And there is some government regulation that's necessary for this, but it's super hard, I think, for governments to catch up to technological advancements. And that's true, I think, for any particular company, right? So we're still in the early days of this, and I think to give a little bit of credit to the companies that are involved here, we can have them answer as well. But it's my opinion that everything has cyclicality to it. And I was talking about this today. This is not just in response to that question. But we're still early, and I said before that sustainability is going to be in this curve, and we're really right at the beginning of it. And I do think that governments have a role in trying to determine what that sustainability looks like for the cloud, but for every type of electricity and every type of power that we use. But at the end of the day, consumers are the ones that are the biggest spenders in buying all the products, and they have to make a decision. And you're right, we don't have our own electricity at home for that exact reason, because it's super inefficient and super hard to manage at scale, and there's no data associated with it, and there's no way to even attach technology to it. Now we can argue about, sure, everyone can put solar and then attach it to a blockchain, and then we can manage it that way too. But that's a little pie in the sky today, because I know a company that's doing it, but it's early. It's early. Anyway, go ahead. If you have something to say, if not, we can move on. Okay. You mentioned APIs, I think, right? So I just want to make sure that I have the right person. It's not an accusation. Well, I can make it one if you want. We're supposed to be arguing. There's something, and I'm curious if everybody knows about this, right? There's something called the Mac Alliance. And it's not so much of a new thing, but kind of a new thing. This is microservices, API first, cloud native. This is a way to develop software, and headless. And I'm curious, maybe we can start with you, Sun, and just talk about that as an infrastructure basis for the way software is built and where cloud nativity fits into that.
Yeah, we have heard a lot of the company talking about we go cloud native, but I hate wording go cloud native.
Yeah, because you
Why?
can't go cloud
Yeah.
native. Go ahead.
Because you have to thinking of the foundation of the company that you're being around here. Like if you are the government based, you are hosting on the VM machine, you are difficult to go cloud native. You can considering like a migration rip and shift first, or moving the VM to cloud first, or using the as a service first. The cloud native mean from the cloud native computing foundation CNCF. define that cloud native is agility or ability to expansion, automate everything. Yeah, like using a CI/CD pipeline, Jenkins, or code deployment. Yeah, this kind of thing. So we have thinking of the readiness of the firm that we are right now, like a people development, learning curve, and technology, and especially in the budget that we invest on it also. So have to thinking of the many dimension of metric. Yeah.
Do you want to just address a little bit this idea of if you have services that get migrated to the cloud, and the difference between cloud migration and cloud native?
Yeah, cloud migration is like you want to migrate something that you have existing on your environment, like you want to migrate the web hosting like Apache web server on the VMware to the cloud.
Right.
You can choose either using the cloud-based pay-per-use or monthly subscription. But cloud native, as the way that defined by Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF, is to integrate the automation, everything like the coding, the pipeline, the module, the Docker and container, everything and stuff. Yeah.
Go ahead. So, do you want to comment on this as well?
Can I have the blue microphone? Just joking. I remember you want to do the advertising for the orange one. Okay. Cut the long story short, yeah. At least from my experience, I work with Thai enterprises,
Okay.
ranging from, let's say, 20,000 people down to 500.
Okay.
So when it comes to the market alliance, the framework, the so-called framework,
Yeah.
I think that depends on each organization, depends on the existing environment. In some organization, they have the luxury to, think about cloud first, think about all the modernized stuff. But in some organization, they can't afford that, so they need to go like step by step, multi-facing approach. So my short answer would be it depends on the organization or the environment. The second one would be, and I'm lucky to be working with lots of CIO down here. So that's one thing of, I'm trying to build the best airplane in the world. But if you're the CIO, that's not the only consideration that you need to make the decision.
What are the other considerations?
You need to weigh that with, do I have a team ready to build that best of the airplane?
To fly it.
And do I have the pilot to fly that
That's a really
plane,
good point.
right? And do I have the airport to land that plane? So that's beyond the design of the airplane. It comes to the operational readiness. It's come to the people skilling in the organization. It's come to the interaction with the legacy system that maybe they can't touch, at least for the foreseeable time frame, etc., etc. So my short answer would be it depends.
But what's the difference for you when you're dealing with a big organization that's 20,000 people that has a fully staffed technology team and an SME? Right? Because what we don't want to have is like access bifurcation. Right? Everybody should have access to similar tools. How do we make sure that SMEs have access to the same airports, same airplanes, and same pilots as large organizations?
So surprisingly, I think the SMB is much easier and simpler because they carry much less smaller baggage. They don't have legacy system.
Legacy system.
They don't have AS400 system sitting in the environment.
Running AIX.
Yep. And nothing in AIX. So much simpler for the SMB. That's one.
It is, but it's also, again, it's a skill level thing as well, right? In other words, they still need to have somebody that can understand how to interact with the APIs, how to do all that other
But
stuff.
guess what?
Go ahead.
At least from my experience,
Yep.
if you SME today, chances are your IT team is going to be cloud first generation, I would say. As compared to if you are a large enterprise, your IT team grow up in my generation with the mainframe.
It's a really interesting point. So you're actually suggesting that the IT team in an SME could be at some level more nimble and more advanced than an IT team at an organization that's 25,000 people in it, just because they just hired them.
Correct. At least that's what I've been seeing.
That's super interesting. Nicola?
Yeah, for us, the SME, I agree. It's also what we are doing this because some of the customers, they come and they say, I want a website, I want a mobile app. What we do is like, we just say, okay, let's go to any cloud and then we can put your application there. It's not like, okay, I will go in a supermarket, buy some VMs and some laptop and computers. It will take 2 months and ping this. So yeah, for the SME, it's really, yeah. And most of the, or at least now the generation are more cloud. So you can find resources on the market and you can build. After what I believe for the existing company and big enterprises is like, they must choose the cloud as a sandbox. And we should have the bridge between existing IT and the cloud.
What does that mean now? When you say they must choose the cloud as a sandbox?
Okay, because if you have a big enterprise, you already have a lot of people, you already have a lot of processes, you have a lot of things, right?
Yep.
And here for them, apparently it's complicated, to innovate or to launch new things, big data, machine learning, and so on. But the cloud already provide all those bare-bone services that you can reuse. So why not connect cloud with the on-premise and leverage what the cloud can do?
So having a hybrid setup.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Did you want to say something as well? Did I miss it? No? Okay. Sound good? We're good. I want to talk about data management and security, right? And I want to dig a little bit deeper. We mentioned it a little bit. Maybe we start with you, Sun. We talked about private computing.
My
But,
turn.
yeah, your turn. But I want to talk about some of the issues and some of the tools around that data management and security and how people should think about this.
Yeah. For the tool is the second thing that I'm thinking. But the first thing is we have to doing about the standard. Like if we do run a financial industry, we have to considering the protocol like SOC 1, SOC 2, or SOC 3 is related to financial report and financial crisis requirement. And more than SOC security is about the ISO 2701, 2001 also. And later we considering about two. Two is the part of fulfill the security part. Like we can considering network security, host security, or the outside attack security. For the tool that in terms of Alibaba, we have tool called SDDP.
What does that mean?
Sensitive Discovery Data Protection. Yeah, you can check it out in the website.
Okay.
Yeah, it's discovery data in your entire system and do a data masking and do a data privacy thing related to PDPA or GDPR stuff.
So can I say, I'm not sure if you know Sentry, can I compare to that and then you will automatic masking according to the config, something like that?
Right. Can do configuration based. Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Can I say more?
Yeah, please. Sorry. You want to say more? You can definitely say more.
I can say and sell. I guess like all the providers, now they are compliant with a lot of like rules and things. But I know on AWS at least, there is like some tools where they can help you, to assess if your setup is correctly done according to this compliance. Like, oh, I want everything to be encrypted, yes, no, and they can flag it for you, right? And there is like external tools, like maybe Orangi, Warden, or Alibaba, they did an integration, and then they can say for you like what you need to fix. And all the cloud providers now they have built-in security services and things, and then because everything is in one location, they can make sure that everything is protected, I guess.
Does this change with quantum at all? I'm serious. Sorry, did you want to talk about tools as well?
Okay, how can I talk about it without selling? I'm trying not to sell this.
It's okay. I mean, in the context of what we're talking about, I think it's important for people to understand what types of tools are there.
Yeah.
And what exactly those tools, the problem that those tools are trying to solve. That's not a sales problem.
Yes. So let me do it this way. First, right? When it comes to data these days, it's not the issue of the cloud. It's not the issue of the IT department. It's not the issue of the chief data officer. It's not the issue of the chief risk officer. And it's not the issue of chief compliance officer. It's one issue that fits to everyone.
So it's everybody's
It's everybody problem.
Right.
If you DPO, you can go to jail in Thailand, just so you guys know. If you mishandling your data, the law is gonna come effective tomorrow, by the way. So, with this being said, right, it's not only about the data that sit in your VMs or sit in your storage, it's the entire estate. Because if you're the DPO of the company X, regardless of that company sitting, you may have a company in Thailand that operates in Indonesia, so what? So in Microsoft, and now I'm going to do the selling part. so in Microsoft, couple of things that we talk. One, we're talking about a hybrid data estate. So we're not talking about storage in the cloud on Microsoft Azure only. We're talking about you keeping your data on premise in your own server. I got a customer who comes to me and talks to me about, my frontline worker keeping customer confidential PII information in their own personal hard drive on the laptop, right? And then every customer in Thailand right now, they run multi-cloud platform, the orange, the blue, and every color, right? So in Microsoft, we're talking about the way to manage access, discovery, the data in the multi-environment. So that's one. Second one is, if you run in an organization, you need to have a data policy. How do you classify your data? How do you know that this is confidential, this is highly confidential? That policy should be unified across your data estate. It's not like, hey, if I work on my email, this is a set of policy. If I work on my Excel spreadsheet, this is another policy. And if I work on my Oracle database, that's another policy. No. It has to be one unified policy that can apply to all the data set in the estate. I see a question. Please.
Yes, but the policy is depending on the country as well.
Sorry, for each policy is different in each country. For Thailand, it's different. That's my own too. So it's like everything needs to be configurable, and you will need to provide based on the country law. Like in Thailand, you cannot show many sensitive data such as religion and stuff, but maybe in other countries they allow. This is the difference. So you will provide the default configuration, or we need to configure, and you have a way to configure it.
For the record, I didn't bring that up because I didn't want to sell, but now it's time to sell.
Yes.
I'm using Azure as well, so
I got it. I'm just joking. So short answer is yes. Yeah. What you need is a tools that can access to data regardless of where it sits. That's one. That's my point. Second, that tools need to be configurable. To your point, that's very clear. And three is that tool needs to come with out of the box kind of template that fit into certain industry requirement. So yeah, so short answer is yes, we do have that.
So I want to ask you something to follow up on that. Just give me a second, you can take the mic. But I want to ask you something to follow up on this. Actually, give it back to me. It's not just in the cloud, but it's in almost every industry. It's a really good point, actually, because the regulations, literally, when you cross a border from Thailand into Malaysia, or Thailand into Cambodia, or Thailand into China, or China into the United States, all the regulations are different. And in the old days, that was okay, because the businesses that were being run in those countries were uniquely local. But that's changing too. And I'm really curious. I don't think there's an answer, but I want to have like a viewpoint on this. Is there a way for big organizations like Microsoft, like Alibaba, to go out to the countries and say, wait a second, it's way too complex. The regulators, so I'll choose the ones that I know, right? Like the SEC in the United States, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the FSA in Japan, the SEC here, to actually get together and not be so local and have global regulations. You're smiling, but it's either that or it's going to be a mess. What do you think?
Is that a question or an opinion?
It's a question. In other words, is there a way? Because at some level, we're moving into this place, and again, this gets into a kind of metaverse question as well, where, who said it before? Governments. You said it. So governments have a role to play, and part of it is in the regulatory environment around not just cloud, but everything. And if that's the case, if there are trade agreements and other agreements, should there be regulatory agreements as well to make this easier? Because otherwise, companies like Microsoft, companies like Alibaba, his favorite company apparently must be a stockholder in AWS, are going to have to do all of this jumping through hoops to make sure that all of these little settings for all of their products are different for every country. It feels unsustainable, for lack of a better term.
Can I address this first and then I can get
Yeah,
to
yeah,
the panel?
please.
So first, big disclaimer, it's just me, not
Yeah,
Microsoft.
I'm just asking for your opinion.
To your point, I don't think that is a possible dream. And the reason is,
You just crushed my dream.
the reason if you zoom into the details of the so-called regulation, at least in my humble opinion,
Go,
80% is the same.
say again.
80% of the regulation are the same.
Fair enough.
Thai is PDPA, we used to make a joke. It's basically somebody in the Thai government just copy the GDPR, make certain change, 20% of the pages,
Cut and paste.
done,
Done. Okay.
right? So I think that's a lot to.
But they're all so. But that answers the question a little bit. Sorry to interrupt you. That does mean that they're working together, right? So it's getting closer. If you're talking about top of the funnel is completely different. As it drops down to the bottom of the funnel, now you're running into this like Pareto principle thing where it's like 80-20, right?
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I think in all fairness to the governments, I think it's pretty much 80% similar in principle.
Okay.
So that's one. When it comes to technology, I don't think that's kind of the big deal. It's just a template, and you can just configurable, tailor-made the template a little bit. You don't need to build something from scratch to be compliant with GDPR and PDPA.
But I think one of his questions. Sorry, go ahead. I think one of his questions was, what if I'm running a business in multiple countries and it's cross-border?
Just to
Go ahead.
I think the solution you guys are discussing is DLP, data loss protection or something.
PDPA and
PDPA, so-
compliance.
But the solution you're discussing is DLP, isn't it? Data loss protection. Okay. So how does it fit with the PDPA? You guys are trying to leverage this technology, new regulation.
Go for it.
I will add just on
Yeah.
this. Actually, this one is not for me only a cloud answer, because you have application on the cloud, you need people to implement them, right? And that those people that will make the application compliant to the region. So all the clouds they provide tools, to assess like if you have personal information in your database and so on, blah blah blah. So all the cloud provider can help on this. But when you implement an application, like we said before, everybody is responsible to make it secure, and even the developers that implement the application. And I believe that's where actually all the compliance will happen, like 80%. Because if you write an application and you log first name, last name, and you have someone that check the log and see, oh, Mr. blah 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 is on the platform, actually you're not compliant. So most of the work actually it's on the application and done by the developers and the one that will implement. But the cloud can help, but they cannot answer the question at 100% for me.
Okay.
Yeah, that is I just support Nicholas. Yeah, in the cloud part we just provide technology part to hosting everything, but the data and encryption is in the coding in the database. So they say the sharing responsibility work in the model of the sharing responsibility that cloud provider can protect the infrastructure and network and the data center. Sorry. Okay, and the application development or end user have to protect data itself. This is a shared responsibility model.
Okay, so my question is actually for cloud provider, you actually passed the PCI DSS already, or we need to buy something that this hardening images that one I think is developer part. For the cloud, it's actually everything past PCI DSS, and when we go to the checking, what you call it, go to the consumer, and then they will test your application. It pass PCI DSS. That part it belongs to the application, right? For the cloud, both of you pass PCI DSS. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
it's mandatory required for cloud pass like data center and the Alibaba also part PCI DSS and PCI 3DS also in terms of the support financial industry in Thailand like banking, non-bank, insurance, blockchain or any fintech startup. Yeah, of course, it's mandatory.
Thank you.
so many topics. First one, easy one, the PCI DSS. For the service available in the cloud, yes, we do comply. Yeah. Just want to call out that when it comes to building an application, is the customer responsibility to make sure that the environment, yeah, is compliant.
Sorry, I don't need the microphone, but yeah, for the cloud part, for as long as it's compliant, it's good, because the other part is about the application that you need to encrypt it, you need to mask all the sensitive data like credit card and stuff. Yeah, to pass the PCI DSS, that one is the part of the developer that need to do it. My question is actually, you already support with that. That's it, because I experienced another local cloud that they said, yeah, they support the PCI DSS, but in the end, it's just like developer doing every single thing.
Yep, and another point I want to call out is that not only do we do support all those compliance requirements, we have a template that helps you ensure that the ongoing operation, you still support it. Right. So again, we all in this room, I assume that we all are builders, so we love to talk about the best airplane in the world. But in reality, the pilot also important. So you can build an environment that fully comply with PCI DSS, but 6 months down the road, 50 VMs also turns up. How do we ensure that you still comply? That's a bigger problem.
So one more question, because we're apparently running out of time, which is too bad. And this is a little bit of a different topic. It's just something that's interesting to me. We want the cloud to be there all the time. Sometimes it goes down. Just like sometimes the power goes down, just like sometimes you run out of gas. Do you think about outage insurance? And is that something that the cloud providers think about? Is it something that they work with the application builders that are building on the cloud think about? How does that work? And do you work together with insurance companies and insurtechs to do that?
Oh, I go first. So for car insurance, so we regularly see, not actually regularly, we see the Google, Facebook, or down sometimes a year. So we dealing with this different method, like for Alibaba Cloud, we have a joint venture solution with the combos or VMs or any kind of the protection, like workload protection, workload recovery, and workload migration. And another thing that I have to mention that we need to considering the multi-region solution. But a multi-region solution have to fit with the financial or budget or architect of your application, also in state-led or stateful. Another thing is I want to recommendation is multi-cloud platform like Microsoft Azure. They have Azure Arcs, that very cool the solution also. Alibaba Cloud also we have the hybrid backup recovery solution also in order to do multi-cloud solution. Yeah, help you to serve.
Okay, I'm not gonna sell. I'm gonna ask the question back to you, Michael.
Go ahead.
Do you have an insurance on your electricity at home?
I don't, but if my electricity at home goes down, my business doesn't go down.
Do you think the ICU in the hospital has an insurance for electricity?
I hope so. I hope so.
No, they have backup generator. They have backup generator.
They do, but they do. Go ahead.
So my point is, do I support insurance? Yes, absolutely. The more choices for people to.
But wait a second. Cloud computing. Again, we joked about mainframes, IBM, whatever, right? AIX. Electricity has been around for 150 years. It's well understood. It's centralized. And if the electricity goes down, right, either your building should have a generator so it comes up, or the power station can then switch over to another power station. That's well defined and well done because it's old. But cloud is new. We talked about it in a bunch of different situations. It's new. So while it's still new, it's not equivalent to insurance, which is, to electricity, which has been around forever.
That's I agree, but my point is this, right? Do I support insurance? Yes. Do I think having an insurance as a mechanism for consumer like all of us
For
here
consumer, no way. For
and,
businesses.
and to absorb the risk, absolutely good things,
Yeah, for
right?
businesses.
But whether the insurance is the only solution or is this the right solution to that outage problem, may or may not.
It's a good answer. That's
Take,
why we
take,
asked that.
take intensive care unit in the hospital, for example, right? You don't need a payback. You need electricity. So my point is, all of us in this room, we have a job to design the right architecture for that particular event. As simple as that.
Yeah, I'm just asking because there are companies out there like Parametrics, which are running through like IoT connectivity or any kind of connectivity. They're monitoring endpoints, and they're trying to determine if the cloud is up or down. They're also trying to build parametric products around whether or not it is, and if it does go down. Like think about Singles Day in China. If the cloud goes down, all of Alibaba's sales are gone for a day. What were Singles Day sales last year? $25 billion? Something huge, right? And now you see, I saw on the BTS today, and it kind of made me laugh. Like now there's 5.5, and 6.6, and 7.7. It's like enough already, right? But Singles Day is a thing, right? And if the cloud goes down, the business goes down, and there's other business stoppage insurance, that's why I asked the question. Sorry.
Yeah, to what they don't say actually is like when you go in cloud, you sign a contract with the cloud provider and they will tell you what is availability for this service, blah, blah, blah. So if the SLA is not achieved, you can ask for some money back. And this is,
That's the insurance.
and after based on those SLA, the builders can say, okay, let's build something a bit more robust and go like all the solutions that you mentioned. So that's kind of an insurance. After that, the cloud provider buy an insurance for themselves is something else.
But there are real insurance companies that are actually underwriting. So I'm not talking about backup.
I really want to see how they assess if it's a profitable business. But, yeah.
We can talk about that offline, but there's a whole infrastructure being built around cloud outage insurance. That's a real thing.
Yeah, because it depends on a lot of people. The one that build the system, the one that hosts the solution, and they need to assess that.
Okay, we have now gone over time, I think. But this has been kind of exactly what we wanted. Hopefully everybody learned something. Hopefully you guys had a good time. I want to thank Nasser Leroy, the head of solutions architect at Alibaba Cloud. Sarut Tipsana, Cloud Solutions Director at Microsoft Thailand. Everybody knows Nicola, thank you as well. And I just want to thank everybody here, too, for doing this, for paying attention, for being engaged. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And apparently we're going to do a Q&A for another 10 minutes or so, if anybody else has questions. Otherwise, it looks like Bo has already started eating the pizza, and there's still beer up there. No, so you're saying no pizza. He's wiping it off his face. But if there are more questions, just let us know. Do you have more questions? Let's go for it.
Blue microphone, by the way. Coming from the open source perspective, we all know that the cloud provider all have the first party services that created by the cloud provider, and so on and so forth. What about the open source community? What about the what do you see from the cloud provider perspective? Is open source going to be beneficial to the cloud first party, or are we competing? That's my question.
Okay. I don't. No. Short answer is no. I don't feel that we are in competition with open source at all. I think, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I'm the believer of consumer choices. Customer will have choices. If they want to use cloud first services, that's okay. If they prefer open source community, that's also okay. Because if you are the customer, it's very much different. Just like what I mentioned earlier, right? It's not about building an airplane, it's about piloting that airplane as well. It takes totally different skill between using the first party services or running an open source services. So it depends, and more choices available in the market is better in my opinion.
same answer. So we are not competitor with the open source community because actually we are in the same side. Alibaba Cloud provide like a fund or money for the open source project, many like Linux Foundation, Apache or MongoDB community. And we have some commercial product we call the Apsara PolarDB also. It's powerful database that allow open source project can connect some feature to develop the database.
So can I ask you a question? You work for Red Hat, you said, yeah? Say it again? No, because Red Hat is actually a really interesting example. I don't remember when Red Hat was founded. It's a long time ago. This is Linux, yeah, Red Hat? Okay. So when Red Hat first started, Red Hat was one of the first companies that said Linux is an open source business. It's free for anybody to use. The distro is, it's classic open source. But Red Hat basically said, you want to use Linux, that's great. But boy, it's super hard to do it on your own. It's just super hard to do it on your own, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to build an entire business around it that actually helps you implement something that's free, and you're going to pay us for that. So this gets back to this idea of cyclicality that I talked about before. I think the same thing is going to happen in almost every vertical with open source software. Is that the open source community, just like OBS, is going to build incredible tools, but only enthusiasts can use them. Because all of us aren't technologists. I use OBS every day. But I wouldn't recommend that you use it, or that your sister uses it, or whatever. So it's a really good question, and I'm kind of glad that you work for Red Hat, because it's the perfect example. It just made me remember, it's not about you. But it's the perfect example of what happens when open source gets developed, and it's a killer product. Linux is amazing. I remember when they started implementing it at Morgan Stanley. I feel like it was the 1930s. But that's the example, and I think that's the mass adoption thing that these guys are doing. They love it, right? Because it's incredible product development, and then they go, thank you, we're now going to implement that inside, and now we're going to institutionalize it so that it's easier for everybody else to use. Is that fair? Yeah. Does anybody else have a question? Come on. Anybody? What should we do? Are we done? The pizza boxes are opening. Okay, so can we just thank everybody again for doing this? I think the panel was amazing. I think they've answered some really great questions. And I do also want to thank the people that are sitting out there that asked the great questions. Making this thing interactive is the best way to make it great. So thank you to everybody again for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Hello everyone. So before you guys getting pizza here, can you guys help us to give us the feedback about the event? Like, I scan the QR code here. So yeah, thank you.